Welcome to episode 28 of Out of Bounds, a podcast where I give my social commentary on different topics in today's society. I'm your host, Terry, and today we're having a conversation about equality. That's what it all boils down to. So, recently we have discussion about, this Loqueesha trailer, which if you haven't seen it is the trailer for a movie where I don't remember. I think he's a bartender, but anyway, he's a Caucasian male. He wants to do this radio show that they're hiring for, but they're looking for a female person of color. So then he calls in, doing an impression of a African American woman and a stereotypical African American woman, and then gets hired and then ends up having this, or this radio show where he gives advice. And so a lot of people are upset about it. And then, of course, we have the continuing conversation of blackface, people still doing blackface and all these different things. Okay. So here's where I come down to it. For me, I think this always goes back to equality because I continue to say, and I'll always continue to say, is equal has to be equal. People claim they want equality, they want things to be equal, but that, I don't know if that's always what they really want, and they definitely don't act like it because equal has to be equal. And what I mean by that is that we can't turn around and point to a historical context as an excuse to make things different and different rules for different people, because that's how we ended up in this place in the beginning. And so when you have things like an affirmative action, which can come down to more of a philosophical debate, but when you have things like that, you're effectively saying we're going to fight past discrimination with discrimination, and that's justified because of history. And to me, I don't think that answers the question. And some people try to go back and forth. It's not discrimination. It is discrimination. By the letter of the law, it's discrimination, but there's a compelling interest of government to rectify past harms. And so there's a lot of things that you have to do in order for things not to be considered or flat out discrimination and fall outside of affirmative action. And so by the letter of the law, it's discrimination. That's what it is. But people have justified it because of the historical context. And so how we should do that, that's a different conversation, but it's an example of how we use, historical context to justify things. And so we give power to words. We give power to actions, all these different things, especially things that aren't objective. Like there's no way of subjectively, shooting somebody. Oh, well, maybe that could, no. That's harmful. We understand that. But when you talk about things like doing blackface and you're talking about certain words that people use, we give power to those things. And yes, we can recognize historical context. We can say, how it was used and what were the intentions before. We can discern intentions or try to discern intentions today. But if we're going to, as a society, agree that those things are bad because we're going to look at it the way they've been historically used, then it has to be the same across the board. So for me, like, I'm not sitting here saying, yeah, we should be able to do blackface. You shouldn't do it. I'm saying that society has to make a choice, and when they make a choice, it needs to be flat for everybody. Because you look at different sketches, or you look at the sketch Eddie Murphy did famously for SNL, White Like Me. You look at movies like A White Chick, different, and we got all the different examples in foreign film too, where you have people of different cultures, ethnicities, genders, impersonating other people. I'm a big comedy fan. You look in stand-ups, there's comedians, that's their whole style is impersonations. And so if we're going to sit here and say that this is inappropriate, offensive, it's a no-go in 2019 for this Caucasian male to impersonate this African American woman, then we have to also say it's not okay for anybody else to do any version of it. There's no, okay, well, a African American woman can impersonate this list of people, but they can't do these people. And African American men, they can do this, but Latino men, they can do this. We can't do that. We can't pick and choose. Equal is always equal. And so then when you are actually pressed to be equal across the board, that's when a lot of people have an issue. And then you realize that it's not always what people actually want. And so, and then the historical context comes in again, and it's just used as an excuse. And it's like, no, I do want equality, but you know that historically such and such. Look, I get that. We can recognize it. It is not an excuse to change the idea of equality. Now, some people might be thinking of equity. Some people just want to switch the power structure, and all those that haven't been empowered are now empowered. That's not equality. That's far from equality. That's something else. And so pushing people on those is when you really see the truth. But like I said, we create this stuff as society. We create meaning as society. Words, actions, different things. There was an episode of Recess, the old Disney show. And I don't know if I mentioned this before on this podcast, but one of my favorite episodes, one of the characters who's a fifth grader, he made up a word and was using it all the time. And since the adults didn't know what the word meant, he ended up getting in trouble, and they told him he couldn't use it anymore. And he was like, basically, you don't even know what the word means. Why am I in trouble? And so if I was tomorrow to start calling people a new name that I made up, or if I was to do a different type of action that maybe not be blackface or something, but if I was doing something different that's never been done, how then we decide if that's negative, positive, how to interpret it, if it's appropriate, if it's inappropriate? We decide that as individuals and as a society. And so that's always been my thing, like with N-word, with anything. It's like, yeah, I understand the historical context, but that's history. We're talking about now in 2019. And so again, I'm fine. I'm not saying it means something different. It can mean something different though. And if we choose to still say it's inappropriate, it's offensive, then fine, then it has to be across the board. And I mean, to an extent that goes back to the N-word, but that's a whole nother conversation. But it's just, it is, that's what it is. It's equal has to be equal. And so I don't want to then see people in upheaval about, and then don't say anything when, you have the next comedian or the next comedy or the next TV show or whatever you have, and someone's, impersonating a different culture. And then we say that's okay. I mean, cause like the white girl voice. I mean, even when you had, Sorry to Bother You, just last year, a whole movie about using your white voice. And then we're going to be upset that the dude is, basically doing a radio show, impersonating a black woman. I'm not here for it. I don't really want to hear that. The historical context argument is just an excuse to make things unequal. And I don't believe that's how we ultimately win. So anyway, that's my thoughts on the whole thing. Go down to the comment section. Let me know what you think. Thumbs up, subscribe, share it around. And until next episode.